So this morning I finally got a chance to try out my new bandsaw, and I decided it was time to make a bandsaw box. So I downloaded the template from Steve Ramseys' YouTube channel. I'll leave a link down below. So at the moment I've got no scrap bits of wood I could laminate together to make this box, but I was lucky enough to score a van load of oak recently off a Facebook market page, so I decided to use a little chunk of that. Now, having never really used a bandsaw before, well, I've never used a bandsaw, I don't really know how easy it should be to cut through oak, as I have no reference to go by. But the bandsaw did cut through very easily. It was just more challenging going around the corners than I expected. So I think there might be a combination of use error and the bandsaw not quite being set up as good as it could be. A little bit more fettling perhaps needs to be doing. Halfway through doing these cuts, I decided that the belt for the motor was probably a bit loose, as I was able to stop the blade a couple of times on the tight corners. So I tightened that up a tiny bit, and that seemed to cure that problem. So once the first cut was complete around the outside and the shape was made, you can see it is quite rough, much rougher than I thought. So I realised then quite a fair bit of sanding was going to be required. Then I set the fence up and cut the back off. That cut lovely actually, that was a very smooth cut. So then I cut in through the bottom and cut out the main drawer shape. Again, much trickier than I expected. I did honestly believe that it was going to be a doddle cutting shapes out on the bandsaw. Many years of using the jigsaw at work I thought would be a fairly similar process, but not quite the same at all. So lots of practice still required, but I guess that's all part of the fun. Next I cut off the front and the back of the drawer. I did do a pencil mark on these to make sure I didn't confuse them at a later point. Then I scribed round the shape of the drawer with my pencil, just using my finger, and cut out the main chunk for the drawer. I decided that I would glue up the box on the curve cut there before I did any sanding on it to make it stronger. So this is actually my very first glue up with my new glue bottle, which I purchased. I saw people using these on different videos, and they look pretty good. I've always just used glue straight out of the pot, but the glue bot is definitely the way forward. Very easy, just the glue's just there ready to go straight away, so that's really handy. I kept the offcuts from the very first cut to use that to help glue up the sides. That worked out very well. So I did a final hand sand of the inside of the drawer before I glued the front and back to that. Otherwise it would be very, very tricky to sand that once the face and back's attached. So gluing that again, pretty straightforward. Spread it around on the front and the back, clamped it up, no dramas there at all. So with everything glued up and clamped, it's time to leave it overnight. and then come back the next day for much sanding. So this is my first use on my Triton oscillating sander. Super impressed with that. I've got a mini review and setup video at some point very soon to follow this. So sanding on this was a pleasure. There was very little dust on the actual round bobbins. A bit more with the big belt on there, but super pleased. I had a pot of this Danish oil left over from a decorating job I did last summer, so I decided to give it 3 coats of this over the next few hours, and I finished it off with just one coat of wax, clear wax, just so it could be polished up. Now off camera I did try and cut a couple of handles on the bandsaw, but I didn't really like any of them, so then I had the idea of using my plug cutter. So I cut out a little circle using that. If you don't know, a plug cutter is used for cutting out little circles of wood that you can use to knock into your countersunk holes. For example, if back in the day you used to fit a lot of door frames, so drill your hole, countersink it, cut a bit of wood off a bit of scrap to match the frame and bash it in. Then you'd have a matching piece of wood, so you could varnish the frame. It looks nicer than if you just use filler. I use the cheap set from Screwfix. Never have a problem with it. The countersinks are really good. I'll leave a link to them below for anyone who might want to have a look. Now, I wasn't overly happy with how the drawer sat in the box. The gap at the top was bigger than it was at the bottom, so I decided to cut a couple of very fine strips to put on glue on the bottom. I used 𝐦𝐸𝐸 to glue them on. I think the Americans call it 𝐜𝐨𝐬. I think they're the same, but I'm not 100% sure. And I also cut a very thin strip just to stick on the back so the drawer would shut flush. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe, share and like, and love to see any comments down below.